Listen.
In a difficult context, in a difficult situation. He says, I'm writing these things to you, hoping to come to you soon. The apostle made plans, but just as we see in James, if the Lord wills. And that wasn't what the Lord willed in Paul's situation. But in case I am delayed, I write so that you will know how one ought to conduct himself in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and support of the truth. Now,
see it? We said it real fast, right? The church is the household of living God, the pillar and support of the truth. Now remember, a house needs a foundation, needs pillars, or it collapses. Keep that in mind. Watch, even in his struggle, he is pretty much showing you what a nightmare this passage is to his satanic doctrines. But listen.
This text is very frequently abused and misused. I remember, I think it was the second edition of this series of books called Surprised by Truth. They were, when people convert to Roman Catholicism, how many of you are former Roman Catholics here?
Look.
Okay, that's a quarter to a third of the congregation.
Quarter. And it's a large church, Apologia. It's pretty much a hangout, country club for cult leaders that will record your private meetings with them. Did you know that? Apologia got called out by other Protestants that when you'd have a meeting with the elders, they'd record your conversations, unbeknownst to you, in order to use it against you. And they say, well, that's for legal purposes, so it didn't get slandered. Don't believe me? Online, Apologia Church Elders, Jeff Durbin, James White, privately recording members when they come to seek counsel. And who exposed them? Protestants. All right?
We don't parade people around and go, oh, look, they've left Roman Catholicism or stuff like that. Because you're converting to Christ. You're converting to his gospel. But when people convert to Roman Catholicism, man, they become celebrities.
Now watch the poisoning of the well, the straw man, the demonization of converts, saying, you're converting to the gospel, converting to Christ, but here they're converting to the church. You know why, dumbass? Because they were already believers in Jesus Christ. They already made a profession of faith and were serving Jesus. What they were missing was his church. So when they discover what the church has been and what it looks like historically, they're elated and excited to know they've come into the fullness of the truth. Hence, the focus on the church. Why would they talk about coming to Christ when they've already came to Christ? You see how he demonizes people? Do you understand why people that end up becoming Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Catholics talk about how they found the church and they're in love with the church? Because they were already believers in Jesus Christ. They already worshiped the Lord Jesus and were serving him to the best of their knowledge. Right? You want me there? So of course they're going to focus on the joy of discovering what the church has always looked like, because they didn't know. Let's continue.
I mean, you've seen the light and you've found the church, and they just there's entire television programs and the Coming Home Network and all the rest of this kind of stuff. And so these books are the stories of converts. And there was this former Presbyterian woman who wrote.
Now, either this guy, again, is dumb and stupid because God is handing him to be stupid, ignorant, or he's just willfully lying. Because I'm going to bear witness as a former 5-point Calvinist Reformed Baptist, same belief as him, Reformed Baptist, that in my life as a Christian, I swear to you, I cannot recall 1 Timothy 3:15 being quoted, let alone exegeted in the churches I went to. I'm being honest. Maybe they did, and I wasn't paying attention. I learned about 1 Timothy 3:15 from the Catholic Protestant debates, the Catholics debating James White. I learned about 1 Timothy 3:15 because he's going to say something almost like implying she's lying about what she claims was her experience as a former Presbyterian. Watch.
Wrote her story for, I think it was the second of this edition. I just remember, I'm not sure why it struck me, but she was talking about this text.
1 Timothy 3:15.
And she said, I had never, ever heard anyone preach on this text in my church. And I'm like,
see?
She was OPC.
See that? Disdain, as if she's lying. As if she's lying. Because, oh, the Orthodox Presbyterian churches definitely will preach on 1 Timothy 3:15. Brethren, the Lord knows if I'm lying or not. I cannot recall. Maybe. It's been a long time. I cannot recall. I do not remember the churches I went to quoting 1 Timothy 3:15 that the church is the pillar foundation of the truth and exegeting its implication. I don't remember. I don't. Now, some of you used to be Protestants. Some of you are. If you're a Protestant, be honest before the Lord. Fear God and don't lie. When's the last time you can remember your evangelical church or your Calvinist church mentioning 1 Timothy 3:15, let alone exegeting it? Can you comment? Let me.
I'm sorry, I know lots of OPC pastors, and they preached on this text. I'm sure they did. And I had never heard that it said that the church is the pillar and support of the truth.
Yep.
The pillar and foundation of the truth. And they don't believe that. Only we believe that. The Roman church is the pillar and foundation of the truth. And you've got to have this high view of the church and all the rest of it.
He doesn't understand the implication. Now watch, I'm going to bury his argument. Show you why God has handed over this guy. He's pretty much useless.
This stuff. And I just remember thinking to myself, how odd. It's so strange when people convert. How they lose their memory of what they used to hear all the time, all of a sudden. And they lose their understanding of what they have been taught. When you look at this, Paul's writing to Timothy, and he's writing to Timothy about a local church.
Now notice this comment.
Everything he says in this letter is about how to behave in the church in its local expression.
This is why this guy is becoming repulsive. And what do I mean? The issue is not whether he's addressing the local church. Let me tell you what the issue is that this guy can't see because he's blinded by tradition. The issue is if what this says about the church is true, then that means the church in its local expression and universal expression will be preserved throughout the ages and cannot be corrupted and engulfed completely by heresy, which means the Lord has sworn you will find the true church in the 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century onwards in its local and universal expression, hence his problem, his burial. Because then I want to ask Mr. White, what did that church look like locally? And what did that church believe? And what did that church practice locally? Locally. And there is the destruction of your Calvinism. You see, he can't deal with this issue.
Now, you can make broader application to the universal church if you want to, but the church that is the pillar and foundation, support of the truth, is first and foremost the church as it is seen in its local expression.
And what did that church at the time of Timothy, in its local expression, believe and teach and practice? See, this is the question. The question isn't whether this is going to prove the papacy. No, don't use that to prove that point, Catholics or Eastern Orthodox. All you need to do is use this to prove the church locally, universally, cannot be engulfed by heresy so that the truth is destroyed, because God has sworn that the mechanism that he's going to use to preserve the truth is the church. No church, no truth. So the church must remain incorruptible, must know the truth, must practice the truth until the Lord returns. But then when I look at the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries, they ain't you, buddy. And they would condemn you and throw you out as a son of Satan. See, this is what he doesn't want to address. This is what he doesn't want to address, right? Now watch. Watch here. Look how bad it's going to get. Look at his analogy destroys him.
So that should have been something she was taught. But secondly, when you think about it,
look,
when you see the description here.
Now watch how he tries to poo-poo the church, and in so doing, he destroys it. Watch the analogy. It's like God is making him stupid. Listen.
Pillar and foundation of the truth. What are these things doing? He doesn't say the church is the truth. He doesn't say the church is the embodiment of the truth. The church is holding something else up.
And if you don't have the thing to hold it up, then where will the truth be found? See how stupid this guy is? Well, I say, these are people that make it hard for you to respect. If you're holding something up, that means it depends on you to keep it up. If you're not holding it up, then the truth vanishes. You see why I say this guy is an idiot? You caught it, right? If you don't have a pillar and a foundation holding up the house and the roof, what happens to the roof? It collapses. In other words, he just destroyed his church and himself, because if it's the church that's holding the truth up, that means the truth is resting on the church, needs the church to be preserved. Because if you don't have a pillar and foundation, the truth collapses. Watch, and then the analogy he gives, and he's blind.
A pillar, we've got these pillars in the side of the room here.
Exactly.
You know? And I'm not sure how much.
Pillar. This analogy buries him because, James White, if those pillars collapse, what happens to in your congregation? The building comes crashing on your head and you die. See how God made him look stupid? Even the analogy just proves the opposite point of what he's trying to get at.
Much weight they actually hold, I don't know, but they are rooted into the foundation of the room. And that's what's supporting somewhat the weight of the roof above us.
So let's follow his analogy. The pillars collapse because the foundation is faulty. What happens to the roof? It comes crashing on your head, killing you to smithereens. Even the analogy buries him. The truth is preserved and lifted up for all to see because of its pillars and foundation, the church. No church, no truth. See how it backfired against him? You see how it backfired against him?
And so there you have a pillar and there you have a foundation. But what are they doing? They're holding something else up. The church holds up the truth.
Wow. So if the pillars crumble because the foundation is faulty, the roof collapses, the roof is destroyed, and everyone in that house is destroyed. Hence, if the church is corrupt, the church is destroyed, the truth is destroyed, it's lost, you won't find it. You see that? And he doesn't see it.
The church proclaims the truth.
Yeah,
the church does not define that truth. That truth has been...
Notice the straw man argumentation to get around how this buries his church. The church does not define the truth. Exactly, God does. But how do you know that truth that God has revealed and defined? Because he committed it to the church. So how do you know what the truth is without the church? How do you know what are the core essential doctrines that God has revealed and defined without the church? Where are you going to find the truth and its definition if not in the church? See it? See that? Terrible.
Been given to the church.
Given,
it is the gift of God, and that
given to the church, for the church to then be corrupt and fail in preserving the truth, because that's what they have to believe. Because I guarantee you, if you look at the first century witnesses, second century, third century, they were not Reformed Baptists. They did not believe in Calvinism. They did not believe in limited atonement. They didn't think that you couldn't lose your salvation. They believed the Eucharist is the actual flesh and blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. Water baptism saves and regenerates, something that Martin Luther believed as well, and that you baptize infants, and on it goes, which to them are corrupt doctrines, false doctrines, because if I hold those doctrines, I couldn't be a member of their church. See? And he doesn't see how it backfires against him.
Truth is going to be defined for us here in a moment as...
Defined for us in a moment. Where? In an epistle that you think is part of the canon. And how do you know that's part of the canon? Oh, that church again. See how that works? So he just told you in 1 Timothy, it will define what the truth is. But how do you know that Timothy is part of that deposit of truth that God has revealed and explained without the church having told you that, without the church having preserved Timothy by copying it and recopying it and recopying it, because you were not around when the church was around to preserve this letter that you're now using to your destruction. See how easy it is to destroy Protestantism, guys? It really is easy to destroy it. And I knew this, and I struggled, and I didn't want to submit or yield.
That mystery of godliness, and it's fundamentally the truth about who Jesus Christ is, what he's done, and what he will do.
Anyway, let him finish his point.
And so the reason that we are to behave in a certain fashion in the church is so we don't get in the way of what we're supposed to be doing as the church in the proclamation of these truths.
So the church is where God has preserved the truth that he's defined. And the church is the custodian of that truth, whom God will energize and empower to preserve until the Lord returns, which means both locally and universally, that church will exist incorruptible, unstained. Doesn't mean we won't have wolves creeping in to try to destroy the truth. They will fail, and they have failed and continue to fail, because God Almighty will always raise up the true bishops energized by the Spirit to know the truth, preserve the truth, explain the truth, define the truth till they die and until the Lord returns. So now, Jimmy, what did that church look like in the first century? What did it look like in the second century? What did the church in Antioch, Syria look like, Jimmy, in its local expression? And I'm going to show you, because Jimmy does not accept the monarchical episcopate. I'm going to use that to bury him in a minute. Let him just finish his point.
That's why we behave within the church in a specific fashion. And so he's writing to Timothy, and he's giving him very practical exhortations for Christian living and Christian behavior, so that one ought to conduct himself in the household of God. The household of God.
So remember his analogy? They're in a church. It's a house. Pillars and a foundation. If the pillars are weak and the foundation is weak and it collapses, what happens to that house? The roof caves in and kills them, right? So you understand his analogy prove the opposite? Yeah. Can I ask you something? Does the pillars and foundation rest upon the roof, depend on the roof? Or does the roof rest upon the pillar and the foundation and need the pillar and foundation to stand? Does the pillar and foundation rest upon the roof? Or does the roof rest upon the pillar and foundation and needs the pillar and foundation to stand? Or it collapses? in his analogy? What needs what in his analogy? So he just buried himself because he says that truth depends upon the church to uphold it, preserve it, defend it, explain it. He just buried himself. Do you understand his analogy? He just buried himself. Because the truth is not the pillar and foundation. The church is. So in his analogy that he gave you, the roof rests upon the pillars and the foundation. They don't rest upon the roof. The roof needs the pillars and foundation. And if it collapses, the roof collapses. So if the church collapses, the truth collapses, and it's done away with.
So the church isn't just some side issue. It's the church of the living God. It's the household of God.
Really? And what did it look like?
If you were in someone's household, you had an intimate relationship with them. And in those cultures, it was beyond just the parents and children. It would be more of an extended family. The household of God is an extended family. And so the church is being presented as this family, this household.
So, Rumble, you saw how his analogy destroyed his case, right? The truth rests upon, depends on, needs the church. If the church collapses, the truth is gone. And since Jesus is almighty, and he is the truth, and will preserve the truth that he's revealed, what does that tell you about the church? Will Jesus allow the church to be corrupted, swallowed up by heresy? And he didn't catch it. James can't answer that question, Trade. Because if you ask him, so when Athanasius, whom you believe was a great Trinitarian champion, taught water baptismal regeneration, stood against the Arians, and was run off his see 5 times, and believed Mary's perpetual virginity, and called her Theotokos, the mother of God, and prayed to her and sought her intercession, and believed the Eucharist becomes the flesh and blood of Christ, and believed you can lose your salvation, and believed in the bishop as being the head of the church locally, and believed in praying for the dead. Was he a believer? Was he saved? He goes, we don't judge hearts. That's up to God. You see what a coward he is? And if you ask him, if I come to your church today, if I come to your church and I believe what Athanasius believed, would you accept me or do you throw me out? I'd throw you out. So he can't answer that question, right? He can't answer that question. He can't answer it honestly. You with me there? He can't do it. So he'll tell you, no, there have been Christians throughout the ages, but you tell them, well, how could they be Christians when they didn't affirm sola fide, that you're justified by faith alone, and that justification is a declaration, not where God makes you righteous, something unheard of, unknown, until Martin Luther came up with it, because you're telling me that's the gospel, and if I don't believe in it, I don't have the gospel, then how were any of them saved? He won't answer because he's dishonest. None of them will answer. You know who are actually honest? You know who's actually honest? The Restorationists, the 19th century cults, Mormons, Adventists, Charles Taze Russell, and his Bible students that became the Jehovah's Witnesses, because they'll tell you the church became corrupt, apostate, and it was lost from the death of the last apostle, John, and then Christ came and restored the church in the 19th century, so you waited 1700 years. They're honest. But in being honest, they're telling you the Bible's a lie. When Jesus swore the Spirit would be with the church and preserve the church, and the church is triumphant, inconquerable, unvanquishable, because though you may have false Christians, there'll be true Christians calling them out and checking the heresy, because God will empower them. The Bible is wrong, or Jesus failed, or Jesus lied. So he can't go that route.